Welcome to another episode of Newcastle Unlocked. I'm your host, Brent Sinclair, and today we'll be discussing the Port of Newcastle. It's one of the most important assets or significant assets in our region. It plays a vital role in connecting our region to the global supply chains. And for years, it's thrived off the back of strong demand for Hunter Valley coal. But as the world shifts away from fossil fuels over the coming decades, the port's looking to diversify its operations. And with that, creates new opportunities for the local community. Now, with key advantages like the availability of land around the port, excellent access to transport links, and also access to a skilled labour force, the Port of Newcastle is in a great position to make the most of these opportunities. And it's my pleasure to have our guest here today, Kate McArthur, Executive Manager of Business Development at the Port of Newcastle. And Kate will share her expertise on the port's plans for growth and exciting initiatives shaping its future. So thanks for joining us today, Kate.
Thanks very much for having me.
So just to give us a bit of an overview to start us off, can you just run us through the port operations? What happens on the day-to-day with the port and what goes on there?
Sure. So I guess firstly, some context about the port. We are the largest port on the east coast of Australia and the world's largest coal export port. I guess to put that into perspective, last year in 2024, we did 158 million tonnes of trade through the port. 150 million tonnes of that was coal, and that was a poor performing year for us.
Yeah.
And the balance of the 8 million tonnes is what we call our diversified trade, which is other bulk commodities, project cargo and general cargo. The challenge for us is we're obviously trying to be much more than a coal port. So it's that diversified trade arm of our business that we're trying to grow, and it's going to be the focus of our sort of day-to-day and our project management moving forward. So we want to see new terminals. We want to see growth in our existing terminals. And of course, the day-to-day, the biggest asset and the most important asset for us to maintain is our channel. So we can do around 10,000 shift movers per annum.
Wow.
And we're operating around 40% capacity at the moment. So when we talk about growth, we're not talking about sacrificing our coal trade for our diversified trade. We do have the capacity to do both. So it's about managing the business as usual with the projects, and that can become a challenging beast at the port.
Absolutely. I could imagine. And just looking at the map of the port, there's a whole bunch of different precincts, and you touched on some of the cargo that you're bringing in. So what is some of the cargo? You mentioned you've got grain, you've got liquids, you can ship repairs and maintenance, and it covers Carrington, covers Kooragang. So what's some of the key sort of freight that you're carrying?
Obviously the largest is coal.
Yep.
Coal has been and will continue to be a vital part of our economic strength moving forward. But as you know, the world is changing, and we're looking at both the challenge and opportunity that comes from the world's largest coal port trying to do other things. So when I talk about diversification for us, that's about future-proofing our region. That's about reducing our reliance on coal as we move forward and ensuring that our community thrives in that challenging landscape. So when we're looking at our growth in diversified trade, what people don't really appreciate is that the port actually does over 25 other commodities through the port. That includes other bulk products such as mineral concentrates, wheat, meal, grains, and other agricultural products. We do a number of bulk liquids through the port, and that includes numerous fuel types and oil types. And then you've got general cargo and project cargo, so steel, aluminium. We're obviously one of the key ports that are importing wind farms for the renewable energy zones, and project cargo and general cargo such as mining and agricultural equipment. So that's a few examples.
Just a few.
Yeah, won't name them all, but it is that part of the business that we are trying to grow. And when I say we're moving away from that reliance on coal, the impact for us at the moment on coal is huge. And we saw that in, when we had a 2-year ban on the imports of coal into China. Our volume dropped from sort of 156 to 158 million tonnes per annum down to 136 million in 2022. And what most people don't appreciate, and it's quite a misconception, that the port makes its money when coal price is good. That's actually not the truth. We make our money off volume throughput. Sure. So when you have a 20 million tonne deficit in volume, you can see how exposed we actually are to volume of one commodity. So that's why it's important for us to grow. It's why it's important for us to create other jobs in our region outside of the coal industry.
And within those, within that cargo group, what could you name just a few of your biggest customers within that group? Obviously, coal's a big one, but who are you servicing in some of those other areas?
Yeah, we've got a number of key tenancies that obviously continue their operations around the port, and key cargo owners. GrainCorp is one of them.
Yep.
Stolthaven, another. Outside of the coal companies, it's largely agricultural products, but local producers, Max Steel, Infrabuild. There's a number of customers. There's more customers than commodities, so
Yep.
be here forever if I named them all.
And what then countries? You mentioned, the ban on coal from China. What's some of the other countries that we're exporting to?
Pretty much
Everyone?
Anywhere we can get to, we will get to. So for us in particular, the existing terminals obviously will continue to operate those trades. Where we're trying to break into is those new markets. So car carriers, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, and containers, that they're the sort of growth areas. To capture containerized trade, we need to get to transshipment hubs. So that would include the likes of the Asia, Singapore market. So we're really trying to increase our infrastructure to access those markets, which we haven't been able to do before.
Yep. And we're talking about diversification. What's the strategy? How do you go about it? You touched on the cargo that came, that we had. So what's the strategy for diversification, and what's your roadmap to sort of get through that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of key areas. So for the Port of Newcastle in the next few years, it's about us planning and being prepared for the future. As I said, we know coal is going to decline. That might not happen as fast as some people would like it to, but it is eventually going to happen. So our job is to ensure that we've created a business that can withstand and adapt to that change. We don't want to become a redundant asset in the future. So what we're trying to do is leverage the land that we have and the channel assets that we have to best service the needs of our catchment area and the consumers within that. So we're looking at designing terminals where we believe we have a solid value proposition, and trying to do that before coal does decline. So using one arm of the business effectively to grow the other side whilst it's there. So I mentioned before that our channel's operating at 40% capacity. We have, with all of the diversified projects within our pipeline, we've got the capacity to do coal, all of the projects, and then some. So our strategy is definitely focusing on growth of new terminals, creating efficiencies in the existing ones.
Yeah, excellent. And even just before, when we were speaking about some of the other precincts that you're setting up, you've got your clean energy precinct, you've got, availability of land. You're an enabler for some of these other areas as well, rather than actually going out, you're agnostic as to the operators. You're just trying to provide an environment that, whilst you go down the direction, you encourage others to invest and participate in that same diversification too. So that's quite an interesting feature of the port there. So when we look at Newcastle Port, you've obviously got some competitors. You've got Port Botany, you've got Port Kembla. What are some of the, I suppose, the key advantages for, say, Newcastle Port versus some of these other ports? What can we offer, and why Newcastle? Is really a question.
Yeah, sure. For us, I guess it's not so much about competing with the other ports. Each port has its own place and its own market to service, and each port has its right to operate in the market. For us, it's about creating choice for the consumer, which hasn't been there in the past. Having options for the consumer is a good thing. It drives competition, which ultimately drives prices down, and everybody loves when their prices stay low. In saying that, there are some key competitive advantages of the Port of Newcastle. I mentioned we have an extensive land portfolio. So we service just under 800 hectares. Around 300 of that is vacant and ready for development. Of course, some of that is sort of earmarked for our priority projects as it will be, but we are assessing what that land looks like from a highest and best use case scenario. So we also have phenomenal connections to rail. So we are connected to inland rail. We have on-dock rail at our Western Basin facility. So that means importers and exporters can jump straight onto the rail network, which creates efficiencies and, again, cost savings for the benefit for the end user. And our channel, that's the most valuable asset. It's Deepwater terminal. It's a deepwater channel. The depth is 15.2 meters, and ideally, when it's not raining and flooding in other areas of the country, we can maintain that to the best of our ability, so we can fit the larger vessels into the port.
Yeah, great. And so all these strategies that you're instigating with the port for this diversification, you're a massive contributor, not only to the local community, but to the national community. In what ways is sort of the port, contributing to that, I suppose, the economy of the hunter?
Yeah. So the Port of Newcastle employs around 140 people within the port itself. So that's through operational and non-operational roles. Outside of direct employment, we obviously have our existing tenants. I mentioned Stolthaven before. PWCS is a huge employer in the region.
Mm-hmm.
Those tenants come with their own indirect and direct employment benefits. But as we embark on our diversification plans, that does create new opportunities for the market. So we learnt way back when BHP Steelworks closed that planning and preparation is required to enter those new markets, new industries, and we'd be remiss to forget that as we sort of enter into a new market as coal declines and mines are shutting up country. So as we focus on new terminals, the Ro-Ro terminal, our multi-purpose terminal, the container terminal, and the Clean Energy Precinct, which are a few of our priority projects, there'll be opportunity in job creation in that. And that can be from the planning and design phase to the construction phase through to the operations phase. Like, we are going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be able to do all of that change ourselves. So there'd be strategic partners and consultants and, stakeholders that are coming thick and fast at us. And, we're not going to try and pretend to do it all on our own.
Mm-hmm.
That would definitely come with partnerships and direct opportunities for other people.
Excellent. Last year, a major roadblock was cleared for the future of a container terminal, which was a long drawn out, publicly mentioned issue. Can you run us through, that issue and sort of any other handbrakes that have been on the port, and what role some of the local members or members of government have been, in playing that in helping that sort of roadblock be overcome?
Yeah, sure. So the port commitment deed was, I guess, a roadblock, as you describe it, put in place to effectively stopped us from growing. It meant that we had to pay a penalty to the state for every container that we bought in over a certain threshold. As you can imagine, when you're trying to build a 2.5 million container terminal and you're paying a penalty on every container that comes through the port, that hampers your business case quite a lot.
Absolutely.
Obviously, that was a long drawn out process, a lot longer than we would have liked it. But where I guess we landed at the end of the day, and Greg Piper, the member for Lake Macquarie, was instrumental in doing this, was to put in the Extinguishment of Liability Bill, which ultimately became an act and removed that constraint from us. So I think it was April last year, we ended up paying a one-off $13.1 million fee to remove that constraint on us once and for all, which sort of now has opened the gates for us to be able to build this container terminal that has been talked about and promised to the community for so long. So now we don't really have any excuses. It's time to crack on and build it.
Well, that was my next question. When are we going to get a container terminal?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're ultimately, I guess, starting from scratch. So we've got to go through the processes of planning and design again. We got most of the way through up to planning approvals many years ago. Design and technology has changed, so we're adapting our plans to those needs. And in the interim, we're focusing on our multi-purpose terminal as well. So we're trying to grow containerised trade through there, not just containerised, but project and other cargo, but really provide a step change in containerised trade. So establishing relationships with shipping lines, existing customers, so that we're not starting sort of cold turkey when we build a container terminal. So one will naturally lead into the other. And that allows us to grow trade whilst we're obtaining planning approvals and doing the design on the larger container terminal. So there's a bit of a method to the madness.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it a build it and they will come, or is it more of a you need a big contract to kick you off, or it's just really complementary work that what you're doing with your other clients?
It's a bit of both. You're never going to contract an entire container terminal. That's just not the nature of sort of ports and the shipping industry. They don't like to contract, and they like flexibility to go wherever they like to go. But there are partnership opportunities there, whether it's potential co-ownership in the terminal or whatnot. Those sort of commercial discussions are still to be had. But the multi-purpose terminal will be the third and final berth that forms part of the container terminal. So we've got many, many years before we require a third and final berth, but we'll stage the development of the container terminal as demand grows. So not going to build 2.5 million TEUs overnight. That would be nonsensical, but ideally start small, grow, and design the terminal to be future-proof, that we can continue to grow as the demand and the customers come.
And where will that be located? Is it Mayfield?
Yeah, it's Mayfield. So we've got an existing berth at Mayfield 4, which is basically the home of the multi-purpose terminal, but the container terminal has 2 new berths, which are to the north of that. So we've got Stolthaven, which is a key tenant at our Mayfield 7 berth. 2 new berths in between that and Mayfield 4 will be the initial phase of the container terminal. So.
Great. And we touched on your assistance from the local members, but does a federal election have much impact on the port's operation?
Look, we're lucky enough to enjoy support from both sides of politics, and that's both at state and federal levels. I mentioned before we obviously had the support of Greg Piper, which was instrumental. Look, I don't think it will change things for us. One of the things that we are actively trying to do at the moment in terms of levels of government is to change the freight and ports policy, which has been under review, and that's largely because it specifies a specific port to be the number 2 container terminal port in New South Wales. From our perspective, we just want that report to be agnostic, and that sort of dictates where taxpayers' money goes at the end of the day. So for us, it's let the private entities play. If we want to build a container terminal, please let us do it so we can prove that it actually makes sense and it's good for our region. So we just don't want any more red tape on us from building a container
enough of
terminal.
That. A little bit off topic, but just getting back to the container terminal at Mayfield, the state government owns the old BHP site at Mayfield. Is there been any discussion on what's happening there? Do you know much about that?
As far as I understand, the state government has leased that to Energy Co.
Oh, yeah.
So largely for the import and rollout of the renewable energy zones. So with the vast majority of wind farms, solar transmission projects that are coming online, a significant amount of storage and laydown area is required to support those renewable energy zones, and I think Energy Co. A key tenet of that site at the moment. So
excellent. We've touched on it before, and without sort of doubling up, well, the availability of land around the port. You've obviously got certain zones and areas marked for future development. What is there? Can you tell us much about how you're activating some of these some of these parcels that are available?
Yeah, sure. So for us, I guess if you look at what our primary objective is at the port, it's trade throughput, so import, export, cargo.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the vast majority of terminals and vacant land at the port, we're open to doing anything on that land that ultimately makes sense and can encourage that trade throughput. So any sort of logistics, ancillary services, production or manufacturing type projects are obviously attractive for those parcels of land. In saying that, there are other parcels of land where we are happy to be a a landlord and a landlord only.
Mm.
And one of those sites potentially is our clean energy precinct. So we are doing all the feasibility work, the front end engineering design, and basically creating that site to be ready for tenants to come in and take over. And, that's not our place. We're not clean energy experts. We'll bring the experts in to be tenants on our land. So there's sort of a balance between, if it's port-related infrastructure that makes sense for us to invest in and own, we're looking at those options. If it's completely bespoke and not in our wheelhouse, we'll look to be a landlord in that sort of situation.
Excellent. And we obviously had the vehicle ship come through at the end of last year. Can you just talk us generally, how that came to be, and what do you see in the future of that industry? Is that something that you're focusing on right now, or is that sort of, I know you're focusing on a lot of different things listening to you, but is that, how did that come about, and what does the future of that look like in Newcastle?
Yeah, I probably should have clarified where I said Ro-Ro terminal before. That actually means roll on, roll off. So one of the priority projects for us is to focus on the importation of passenger vehicles and high and heavy cargo, which is the mining equipment and agricultural equipment. We're looking to convert one of our existing precincts, which is our general cargo precinct, located at Carrington. At the moment, around 100% of the cars that are imported through the state are coming through the Illawarra region. And for us, when a lot of that high and heavy cargo is going to the Hunter Valley in terms of the mining sector and the agricultural sector, and we've got a couple of key distribution centres, obviously north of Newcastle. For us, it makes sense to have another car import terminal within the Port of Newcastle. So we're looking at creating new spaces within the general cargo precinct. Over Christmas, that was probably our first test on our capability. Probably come a little bit quicker than I would have liked at the end of the day. But we had obtained DAF approval in October of 2024 to be a first point of entry port for new passenger vehicles. And then in December, over the New Year period, there was some industrial action that happened, which created a really good opportunity for us to test the capacity, how many cars we could actually get through today in our existing terminal, before we started sort of our stage 2 and stage 3 of that car terminal development effectively. So a lot of lessons learned out of that, but now we're cracking on and continuing to grow and getting the appropriate planning and infrastructure approvals to grow that Ro-Ro terminal.
Excellent. And I know it's not your area of focus, the clean energy precinct, but can you just give us a bit of an overview of what that is? It's over in Kooragang Island, but what's the objective of that precinct, generally speaking?
So the site is, if people from Newcastle remember, the old T4 terminal, which never ended up getting built for the coal stockpiles. It's 220 hectares of currently vacant land. We received $100 million in government funding to basically do the front end engineering design works for that site. So we're connecting power, water, sewer, basically getting that site ready for key tenants. So our long-term vision would be to create a hub that effectively supports clean and renewable tech. Ideally, we'd want to start with sort of blue energy production with an ultimate goal to lead to green energy production that is capable to being exported throughout the port.
Excellent. And one of our other key assets in the area is the airport as well. Do you work much in relation with the airport? Any sort of crossover with customers and I suppose promotion collectively, or in the RAF base even, or is it fairly separate?
Interesting. We do work closely with the airport. We definitely have very similar businesses. We actually, the CEO of Newcastle Airport and I were sitting on a panel together at a Dantier presentation a couple of weeks ago, and I think we actually tweaked out exactly how much our businesses were alike. I think we still service sort of different niche areas, despite being, I guess, a conduit to the rest of the supply chain. So whilst the port and the airport are big scale infrastructure owners, we are both a very small part of the supply chain. So trying to influence and change existing logistics paths and global trends is extremely challenging. So we both have those sorts of shared challenges, which, ideally we can both overcome together.
Sure. And one final question about look, coal is obviously our biggest export out of the port. What's the future of coal? Obviously, you set up for it. We're one of the biggest exporter of coal.
Mm-hmm.
What does the future of that look like? Is it a 10-year, 15-year, or is it a changing landscape as we speak? And what are you seeing, boots on the ground at the moment?
Yeah, I think particularly in the last 12 months, there's probably been a bit of a change in sentiment towards coal. Prior to that, it was a very hard push towards renewables, a decline in coal. We were very famously broken up with on the front page of the newspaper by our main bank, basically because we are such a coal supporting business, I guess. And people were trying to sort of de-link from any sort of investment that is linked to coal, so superannuation funds and the like. So we actually found it very difficult when we were doing our refinance a couple of years back to find those people that did want to be associated with coal. It actually forced us to look into the bond market, think a little bit more creatively. So we had Australia's first sustainability linked loan, which meant that if we did certain ESG benefits and diversification projects, that we could ultimately reduce our debt that way. But finding in the last 12 months, people are realizing that, as I said, coal is not going to decline as fast as people want it to or think it should. I think ultimately we're just not ready for it. I would think there is a shift, probably a decade shift in terms of the demand and supply of coal. So originally we were looking at a bit of a plateau, ultimately dropping off around 2035 and starting to decline from then. We're probably looking around the mid 2040s now, and the decline starting then. So it is, very much a long lead time. It's very much pushing out. Like I said, we can't wait until that decline happens, until we focus on our diversification projects. We need to start doing it now, so we're ready when the time comes.
Excellent. Well, look, there's some great information on the Port's website about all of the strategies and the zones. I think it's really interesting to see the opportunities that it presents as well. I'm very keen to see how the community adapts to some of these changes. I think there's some great opportunities, lots of land there as well for when the times come to invest in these new initiatives. But I just want to say thanks very much for joining us and sharing your insights today, Kate. It's been it's very interesting. It's quite a dynamic business you're in, that's for sure. But I appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.